Right now, you might be lying awake because you are carrying the heavy emotional temperature of everyone else's life inside your own body. Your mind is frantically replaying the grievances of your friends, the silent moods of your family, or the workplace conflicts you feel personally chosen to resolve. You have spent your entire day running between the cold hearths of other people, attempting to ignite their comfort while your own central energy turns to freezing gray ash. There is an exhausting whisper inside your head that claims your existence is only valid when you are relieving someone else's discomfort. You have trained your heart to erase its own borders, to keep the peace for everyone around you. Maybe you have felt this too. This profound fatigue of being the universal problem solver who has nowhere to put down the weight. Tonight, your exhaustion is not a sign of emotional failure. You have simply been spending your inner fire far too quickly to notice your own depletion. We are not going to force your mind to become completely silent right now, and we will not ask you to fix your habit of overgiving before you are permitted to sleep. We are going to allow your nervous system to sit down in the quiet, sheltered space of this dark room. A surprising insight of Buddhist wisdom reminds us that your constant caretaking is not an act of pure compassion, but a subtle form of control, born of deep anxiety. The mind falsely believes that if it stops holding up the world, everyone will freeze. But real safety does not require your self-annihilation. By trying to maintain every fire in the valley, you are not protecting the community. You are simply allowing your own sacred warmth to scatter and die. Let us invite a soft rhythm into your breathing without forcing your lungs to achieve a perfect depth. Simply notice the cool alpine air entering your nose, bringing the clean scent of dried juniper berries and frozen cedar resin into your chest. Let that stillness linger in your ribcage for just a brief, comfortable moment. Now let the air pass softly through your lips, carrying away the stinging heat of the worries you carried for others today. Feel your spine drop a fraction lower into the mattress as you let the breath go. With each long exhalation, you are stepping away from the cold drafts of the valley. Your body is resting safely inside a small timber cabin, surrounded by walls of solid cedar that require absolutely zero effort from you to stand against the wind. Look at the immense friction your spirit has generated since the sun went down. You have been walking through the dark corridors of your memory, checking on the comfort of every person who crossed your path today. You replay their words, you analyze their silences, and you look for hidden fractures in their relationships that you might have missed. You use your own guilt as a whip to drive yourself forward, believing that you must stay awake to calculate a solution for their pain. This relentless auditing is what truly leaves your spirit freezing in the dark. You are starving your own temple fire by refusing to keep any warmth for your own ribs. If it feels right, let your wrists and your fingers loosen their grip on the fabric of your life. Your hands may be slightly curved right now, as if they are still holding the iron handles of a heavy burden. Allow your palms to open completely toward the ceiling, becoming soft and still like two cool stone plates resting on the floor. Your hands do not need to carry a single ember to another hearth tonight. They can become completely empty, letting go of the responsibility for everyone else's emotional climate. You are practicing the holy art of boundaries simply by allowing your muscles to drop their guard. Even noticing how much you have been carrying is a beautiful act of self-preservation. Perhaps we can bring our soft awareness to the deep physical spaces where your caretaking anxiety likes to hide. Notice the muscles across your chest and check if your rib cage feels like a tight cage protecting a fragile flame. Let the breath move gently into that tightness, softening the borders of your heart with every slow expansion. Move your attention up to your jaw and the small spaces behind your ears. These muscles have been locked in a posture of constant vigilance, waiting for the next cry of distress from the valley. There is no need to watch the horizon tonight. The alpine wind is moving harmlessly through the tall cedar branches outside, and you are fully permitted to let the world take care of itself. In a moment, this high forest will show us an ancient story about an apprentice who tried to warm a whole mountain through the force of his own panic. We will discover what happens when our desperate overgiving meets the absolute, unhurried reality of a single piece of granite. But before we journey into his world, Let your eyes become beautifully heavy. Let the skin on your forehead go smooth like snow settling over an undisturbed clearing. There is no requirement for you to fix a single relationship before the morning arrives. The dark cabin does not need your surveillance to stay warm. It simply asks for your willingness to gather your scattered fire back into your own body and to trust the quiet dark where you are finally allowed to be still. Let us drift now toward a place where the high mountain ridges meet the heavy gray clouds of a turning season. Long before your own winter days became structured by relentless digital demands, a young seeker named Torah lived in a remote cedar settlement. Torah was an apprentice at a sanctuary nestled deep within an alpine forest. He possessed an incredibly sensitive heart, but this sensitivity carried a painful shadow. He felt personally accountable for every draft and every chill that entered the rooms of his companions. When the mountain wind rattled the thin wooden slats of the cabins, Torah felt a sharp prick of anxiety in his own chest. He believed that if anyone in the community suffered from the cold, it was a direct consequence of his own failure. The autumn was ending abruptly, bringing an early mountain snow turn that dusted the green pine needles with white frost. As the temperature plunged, an intense, driving panic began to consume Torah's mind. He could not sit still during the evening reflections. While the other seekers sat quietly, Torah would watch the frost gather on the window panes, his muscles tightening with every drop in temperature. He felt an overwhelming obligation to protect everyone from the approaching winter. He believed that his only value to the sanctuary was his ability to provide comfort, and that if he stepped back to rest, the entire community would freeze in the dark. To answer this fear, Torah found an old heavy iron fire basket in the courtyard woodhouse. The vessel was a crude piece of metalwork, built with multiple rough handles and a series of small, narrow fissures running along its base. Every evening as the darkness took over the cedar grove, Torah would kindle a massive fire in his own small cabin. He would let the wood burn down until the hearth was filled with glowing red charcoal fragments. Then, using a pair of iron tongs, he would scoop the hot embers out of his own stove and pack them tightly into his fire basket. He would lift the heavy iron container by its rough handles and run out into the freezing alpine wind. He spent his nights sprinting along the steep, icy paths of the sanctuary, carrying the glowing coals to the cabins of the other monks. He would slide open their stove doors and drop his own hot embers inside to ensure their rooms remained perfectly warm. But the physical cost of this frantic labor was immense. Because he was running so fast, the wind would whip through the open basket, causing the cedar resin to burn with a fierce, blinding heat. The unyielding iron handles grew scorching hot, searing his palms and leaving deep, raw blisters across his skin. Yet, Torah refused to slow down or acknowledge his own pain. He believed that his bleeding hands were a necessary sacrifice to keep the valley safe. As he ran through the dark drifts, the structural flaws of his basket began to work against him. The small fissures in the iron base allowed tiny fragments of burning charcoal to slip through the cracks. They fell uselessly into the deep drifts, leaving a long trail of dying orange sparks that hissed and vanished instantly in the snow. Torah could see his resources leaking away, but the sight only made him move with a more desperate velocity. He would pack the basket even tighter, robbing his own hearth of its core to compensate for what was lost on the path. He was running himself to the point of absolute physical collapse. When he finally returned to his own small cabin in the pre-dawn hours, the reality of his choice was always waiting for him. His personal stove was entirely dark. The central fire had been stripped of every single glowing coal, leaving nothing on the stone hearth but a heap of cold, lifeless gray ash. Torah would lie down on his hard timber platform, his body shivering violently under his light linen robes. His blistered palms would throb with a sharp, stinging heat in the freezing room. While his mind raced with anxiety about the next day's frost, he was completely empty, frozen, and broken in his effort to be the sole provider of warmth for the mountain. But the deeper lesson of the scattered fire had not yet revealed itself to his awareness. One morning, after an exceptionally brutal night of wind and snow, Torah dragged his exhausted body out into the courtyard. His hands were wrapped in rough strips of stained cloth to hide his burns. He could barely close his fingers around the handles of his basket. As he crossed the frozen clearing, he encountered Master Josa, an elderly carver who lived in a simple stone shelter at the edge of the cedar grove. Josa was a man who moved only as fast as the grain of the wood allowed, spending his days shaping simple kitchen spoons from fallen juniper boughs. The old carver was standing near the mountain path, holding a wooden shovel, his movements deliberate and calm as he cleared the fresh snowfall. He did not reprimand Torah for his frantic behavior, and he did not offer a soothing phrase to heal his wounds. Instead, Josa stopped his work, leaned on his wooden handle, and looked down at the trail Torah had sprinted across during the night. He made a quiet gesture with his hand, inviting the young apprentice to step closer and examine the frozen ground. Torah walked over, his chest heaving with fatigue, his iron fire basket dangling loosely from his blistered wrist. He looked down at the snow, expecting to see nothing but white drifts. Instead, he saw a long, jagged line of black streaks cutting through the pristine snow. They were the cold, carbonized remnants of the embers that had leaked from his basket during his midnight runs. The heat of the falling coals had melted small, ugly holes in the ice, but the moisture had instantly extinguished them, leaving nothing behind but pockets of frozen soot. Not a single dropped ember had brought warmth to the mountain. They had simply blackened the path and died in the dark. Master Josa reached out his old, calloused hand and gently touched the stained cloths wrapped around Torah's palms. He did not pull the fabric away, but the soft pressure of his fingers made Torah flinch from the raw pain beneath the linen. The old carver looked into the young man's tired eyes, his voice as steady as the granite walls of his shelter. He asked Torah why he was burning his own flesh to cook meals for kitchens that already possessed their own woodpiles. He asked him to look at the long line of black soot and to consider if his frantic running was truly saving the community from the winter frost. Torah stood perfectly still in the alpine wind, a sudden, profound wave of emotional recognition breaking through his defensive armor. He looked at the black streaks in the snow, and then he looked down at his own dark, empty cabin in the distance. For the first time, he saw the total self-deception of his lifestyle. His frantic overgiving had not been an act of pure holy compassion. It was a chaotic pattern driven by his own terror of being found useless. He had been destroying his own central fire, leaving himself freezing and raw to chase an illusion of universal control. He looked at the old wood carver, his eyes filling with quiet tears, and he realized that the hearth he had neglected the most was the one beating inside his own chest. Slowly, the teaching becomes personal as we watch Torah stand in the frozen clearing. His blistered hands are the exact shape of your own internal depletion tonight. You have been carrying that same leaking iron basket through the corridors of your own modern relationships. You believe that your exhaustion is the price you must pay to remain safe in the hearts of others. But before we find out how Torah learned to hold his fire differently, let your own mind notice the black streaks you have been leaving on your path. You are allowed to stop running through the drifts. You can stand flat on the solid ground, drop the heavy handles of your obligation, and allow the cold mountain air to cool the hidden burns you have been carrying for so long. The black soot marks cutting through the white mountain snow reveal a truth that points directly to the center of your own overthinking mind. We often believe that our exhaustion is a necessary proof of our deep love for others. We think that if we stop managing the moods of our family, or if we stop solving the crises of our friends, we are being cold. We treat our own personal energy like an endless supply of kindling, throwing our peace into every cold room we encounter. But when we look closely at the black trails left behind by our frantic running, we see that we are not actually warming the valley. We are simply dropping our precious vitality into the drifts, leaving our own internal hearth completely dark and freezing. One of the great insights of the Buddha was that our human experience is almost always divided into two entirely separate layers of discomfort. The first layer is the natural winter of living in a changing world. It is the reality of an unexpected disappointment, the cold silence of a distant loved one, or the emotional struggles that the people around us must face on their own journeys. These occurrences are heavy, they are real, and they are completely outside our ability to govern. You cannot command another person's heart to remain warm when their own internal patterns have driven them into a frost. This primary chill is simply the baseline weather of being a human being among other human beings. Our true torment grows when our mind refuses to let the mountain valley experience its own natural season. We add a massive, secondary burden of resistance, control, and self-judgment to the original chill. This ancient wisdom is not telling us to stop feeling our natural care for the people in our lives. It is not asking us to become an icy block of stone that cares nothing for the suffering of the world. The desire to bring comfort to a friend or to ease the tension in a home is a beautiful expression of your true light. The teaching of the cedar grove is pointing towards something much quieter. It is showing us that our suffering lives not in our capacity to love, but in the frantic way our mind holds the responsibility for everyone else's climate. The Buddha was showing us how to stop adding a second wound to the first. The cold wind that rattled the cabins was the primary pain of the mountain. It was a simple, environmental reality that required each seeker to tend their own woodpile with patience. The secondary suffering was what Torah created when he lifted the leaking iron basket at midnight. He allowed his own fear of being useless to turn his care into a violent assault on his own skin. He manually robbed his own stove to fix what he could not control, layering his own bleeding exhaustion on top of the natural winter. He became broken, not because the mountain was cold, but because he could not endure the existence of a hearth he had not personally fueled. Let us translate this ancient understanding into the modern emotional language of your own life. The concept of attachment is not an academic theory. In your daily experience, attachment is that tight, suffocating restriction in your chest that whispers that you cannot be safe until everyone around you is completely happy. It is the desperate grip that forces you to hold the hot iron handles of other people's problems long after the sun has set. When you turn your care into a frantic obligation, you are acting exactly like the apprentice in the snow. You are dropping your own peace into the drifts, trying to buy a sense of personal worth by burning your own flesh for kitchens that already have their own timber. In our modern world, we often confuse mindfulness with a state of cold detachment. But true awareness is simply the quiet, spacious capacity to stand still on the icy path and look at what is actually happening. It is the ability to notice the urgent impulse to fix a relationship without immediately running out into the storm to do so. Mindfulness allows us to see our caretaking habit as an emotional pattern born of fear, rather than an absolute command that we must obey. When you stop sprinting through the drifts, you are not abandoning the people you love. You are simply giving your own tired nervous system permission to return to its own central shelter. Think of how much internal friction you generate when you treat every cold mood in your environment as an active emergency for your own identity. You lie awake for hours, turning another person's silence into a definitive proof of your own unworthiness. You believe that if you can just calculate the perfect phrase, or if you can just carry one more ember of validation to their door, the frost will melt completely. This constant mental auditing is a profound spiritual trap. You are turning your beautiful capacity for compassion into a tool of self-punishment, convincing yourself that your hearth must remain empty until the entire mountain is warm. But real inner peace does not require you to become the savior of the valley before you are allowed to rest. Wisdom begins when you change your relationship with the cold spaces that you cannot fix. When an anxious thought enters your awareness tonight, declaring that a relationship will freeze if you step back, you do not have to pick up the iron tongs to answer it. You do not have to believe the panic just because it speaks with an authoritative tone inside your skull. You can choose to witness the terror of being found inadequate with immense, unconditional tenderness. You can name its fragile structure and let it pass through your awareness like a gray winter cloud moving across the dark pines. In a moment, this high forest will show us how to transform this painful friction into a completely different kind of warmth. We will discover how to gather our scattered embers back into a single place of absolute safety. But before we learn that deeper discipline, let your body recognize that nothing needs to be forced or fully resolved during these midnight hours. The people whose comfort you have been carrying are resting in their own rooms, completely independent of your overthinking. The alpine wind outside your cabin is simply moving through the branches, and it does not require your permission to blow. You can officially resign from your position as the universal keeper of the fire. Notice how much less energy it takes to lie flat on your flax mat than to carry a burning iron container through a midnight snowstorm. You are practicing the holy art of non-striving simply by allowing your muscles to remain completely stationary at midnight. You are reminding your tired brain that your value as a human being is not a product that you must continuously manufacture through absolute exhaustion. You can let the unlit stoves of your tomorrow rest quietly in the dark woodhouse of your history. You can trust that the vast, silent shadow of the night is exactly where your soul needs to rest, to remember its own unshakable wholeness. Slow, steady, step by step, the mind begins to lose its desperate velocity. Let us settle completely into the solid foundation of this quiet evening. There is no need to change how your body is lying, and there is no requirement for you to master a difficult technique tonight. Your bed is simply a safe timber platform inside our winter cabin. The thick cedar walls are fully secure against the alpine drafts, protecting your resting form with absolute stability. You can hear the distant wind moving through the high branches outside, but it cannot touch your skin. If it feels right, let your eyelids close down slowly, allowing the remaining glare of your daytime efforts to melt away into the dark corners of the room. You have arrived at a quiet sanctuary where no one is asking you to perform. Let your attention drop into the gentle flow of your natural breath. You do not need to expand your chest by force, and there is no reason to alter your natural pace. Simply observe the small, quiet rise of your ribs as the air arrives in its own time. Notice how your body deflates all by itself when the air leaves your lungs. If it feels right, you might invite a slow breath through your nose. Let the cool scent of dried juniper berries rest in your chest for a brief, comfortable moment. Now let the breath slide out through your lips like a quiet sigh moving through the pines. Feel your spine sink a fraction deeper into the heavy mattress. With every slow exhalation, you are choosing to step back from the cold mountain paths. Perhaps we can bring our soft awareness to the physical spaces where your caretaking anxiety likes to hide. Notice the palms of your hands as they rest against the bedding. Your fingers might be curled slightly inward right now. They may feel stiff or tired, as if they are still desperately gripping the rough iron handles of your daily obligations. If it feels right, you can allow each finger to uncurl very slowly. Let your palms open completely toward the ceiling, becoming soft and loose like two cool stone plates resting on the cabin floor. Your hands do not need to hold a single burning coal for anyone else tonight. They can become completely empty, letting go of the responsibility for the emotional climate of the valley. Even a tiny release in your wrists is enough to invite a profound change. Move your attention into the wide slope of your chest. This is the central hearth where you have been keeping the fire for everyone around you. Notice if the muscles around your ribs feel tight, or if you are holding your breath in a silent posture of constant vigilance. Do not try to force these fibers to relax immediately, because healing cannot be manufactured through aggression. Simply allow your breath to move into that narrow space with immense kindness, letting the boundaries of your torso become soft and spacious. There is no emergency that requires you to guard the valley at midnight. The high forest is vast, the night is dark, and you are fully permitted to let your fire rest within its own borders. As you rest in this quiet cabin, a specific thought may arise to claim your attention. Perhaps you remember an unresolved conflict with a friend, or a family member's heavy mood from earlier today. Do not try to push the memory out of your mind, and do not punish your heart for still feeling anxious. Even noticing the old impulse to intervene is an act of great spiritual clarity. You can give the pattern a quiet, gentle name inside your awareness. You might say to yourself, "There is the leaking basket," or "There is the urge to run out into the snow." By naming the visitor, you are no longer caught in its frantic momentum. You are simply standing on the solid floor, watching the pattern from your shelter. In a moment, the quiet rhythm of this cabin will lead us into a deeper space of transformation, where we will discover how to hold our inner warmth without breaking our own boundaries. But before that deeper understanding unfolds, let us use a gentle image to hold your current worries differently. In the quiet sanctuary of your imagination, you might visualize that heavy iron fire basket resting on the floor before you. See the rough metal handles and the narrow fissures running along the base. Inside the container, look at the hot, glowing charcoal fragments you have been carrying through the drifts today. These embers represent the exact weight of the responsibilities you have assumed for others. They hold the moods you tried to fix, the approval you tried to earn, and the deep guilt you felt when you could not make everyone warm. Feel the dry heat radiating from the iron vessel, reminding you of how much energy you have spent. For a long time, your mind believed that you had to lift this heavy basket and carry it through the storm to be worthy of love. You believed that if you stopped running, the people you care about would freeze in the dark. But tonight, there is no need to force that labor. Imagine yourself simply sitting down on the dry timber floor, leaving the iron basket exactly where it is. You are choosing not to close your blistered fingers around the scorching handles. Watch what happens when you stop moving the container through the alpine wind. Without the cold drafts to feed the flames, the intense, blinding red glow of the embers begins to soften. The sharp heat starts to recede into the center of the charcoal. The burning pieces of cedar are no longer spitting sparks into the air. They are beginning to cool down naturally all by themselves, turning from a vibrant orange into a deep, quiet crimson. A soft, clean layer of white ash begins to form over the surface of the coals, insulating their warmth and shielding them from the external drafts. The heavy iron basket is no longer a tool of exhaustion. It has become a still, self-contained hearthbed that requires absolutely nothing from your hands. The light in your imagination dims into a gentle twilight, casting a peaceful shadow across the room. Bring your awareness back to the physical weight of your limbs on the bed. You do not need to achieve an immediate state of perfect healing tonight, because your spirit is not a project that must be completed before dawn. True transformation happens in very small increments, through the quiet willingness to leave the world unmanaged for a few hours. If your thoughts wander back to the cold valley, look at them with immense compassion. There is no need to hate your mind for its old habits of overgiving. You can return to the cool sensation of the night air on your skin whenever you are ready. You are safely tucked away inside your own temple, and your only task is to inhabit this single breath. Let the deep, solid stillness of the cedar walls settle into the core of your spirit. The people whose comfort you have been carrying are resting in their own destinies, completely independent of your midnight overthinking. The unfinished conversations of your daytime life can remain frozen in the snow until the morning comes. You are fully supported by an ancient, unyielding foundation that knows how to preserve your path while your intellect is asleep. Let your eyelids become beautifully heavy, like snow gathering on the branches outside. Allow your mind to dissolve into the dark, protective space of the cabin, where you are finally given total permission to rest without needing to earn it. The high alpine night deepened into an absolute, unmoving silence as the early winter snow turn completely blanketed the cedar grove. Inside the sanctuary, the air grew so crisp that each inhalation felt like fine glass, carrying the sharp, pure scent of frozen pine needles and cold stone. Tora sat within his small timber cabin, watching his breath form small, pale clouds in the dim light of a solitary tallow candle. He had stopped running through the midnight drifts with his leaking iron basket, yet the internal habit of universal responsibility was far from dead. His palms were beginning to heal, the raw blisters turning into tough protective calluses, but his mind remained highly alert to every groan of the wind. He was no longer scattering physical embers, but his spirit was still constantly listening for the distant footsteps of trouble, ready to leap up and defend the comfort of his peers at the first sign of distress. The real test of his emerging boundaries arrived when the midnight snow grew thick and blinding, drifting high against the cedar walls. A frantic, heavy knocking suddenly rattled Tora's wooden door, breaking the holy quiet of the mountain. When he slid the timber latch back, a young novice monk named Kenji stumbled into the room, his robes covered in white powder and his entire frame shaking violently from an intense emotional storm. Kenji had been involved in a bitter, painful misunderstanding with the senior kitchen stewards. Earlier that evening, he felt deeply rejected, misunderstood, and abandoned by his teachers, and the weight of the grievance had filled his young heart with a frantic, boiling panic. Tora felt his old wound ignite instantly within his chest, a sharp heat rising straight into his throat. His deeply ingrained instinct screamed at him to throw himself completely into Kenji's chaos, to absorb the young man's bitter chill, and to offer 100 desperate explanations to make the pain disappear. He wanted to pace the floor, to validate every grievance, and to promise that he would personally confront the elders at dawn to restore the novice's standing. His mind began to spin a complex web of solutions, ready to empty his own internal reserve of peace to fuel Kenji's collapsing spirit. He was on the very brink of lifting his old invisible basket, preparing to burn his own stability to mend a hearth he did not own. Before Tora could speak a single word of panicked reassurance, the quiet shadow of Master Josa appeared in the open doorway, his wooden shovel resting against his shoulder. The old woodcarver did not offer a dramatic intervention, and he did not scold Tora for his immediate impulse to overextend. Instead, he waded through the drift into the center of the cabin, carrying a heavy, dark object wrapped in a piece of rough hemp cloth. He placed the burden directly onto the cold floor between the two young men, letting the fabric fall away to reveal a solid, uncarved square of mountain granite. The stone was completely gray and coarse, its edges rough and unpolished from centuries of exposure to the alpine elements. It was a massive thermal hearthbed, dug from the deepest root of the mountain, holding an absolute, unyielding density that seemed completely unaffected by the storm outside. Master Josa reached into the pocket of his heavy tunic and produced a small pair of iron tongs. He walked over to Tora's dark stove, where a single, deep cedar coal was glowing with a quiet, concentrated crimson heat beneath a thin layer of old ash. The old carver lifted that single ember with the tongs and placed it gently into a small, shallow indentation in the very center of the uncarved granite block. He did not blow on the coal to make it flare, and he did not add extra kindling to create a brilliant, roaring blaze. He simply took a tiny handful of gray ash from the hearth and sprinkled it softly over the single ember, insulation shielding its core from the cold drafts of the room. The old carver looked at Tora, his eyes reflecting the tiny red point of light in the center of the stone. He told the young apprentice that a true temple fire is not built by scattering sparks across the snow, nor is it built by allowing every passerby to throw their own cold water into your hearth. He instructed Tora to sit flat on the timber floor before the granite block, to place his hands flat on his own thighs, and to do absolutely nothing to fix Kenji's tears. He commanded him to perform a difficult, quiet act of internal discipline. He told him to remain completely stationary, to harbor his own central warmth within his ribs, and to let the granite stone teach him how to hold space, without becoming the casualty of another person's winter. What happened next challenged every concept of goodness that Tora had cultivated throughout his life. Kenji continued to weep and pace within the narrow cabin, his words tumbling out in a bitter, chaotic torrent of anger and despair. Tora's mind screamed at him to break his silence, telling him that his stillness was a form of cruel indifference, and that he was failing his companion by refusing to match his panic. He felt an agonizing temptation to lean forward and absorb the shock, but he remembered the long line of black soot in the courtyard snow, and he chose to obey the old carver's instruction. He kept his spine straight, anchored his awareness to the solid, unmoving mass of the granite block, and breathed slowly through his nose. He practiced the difficult art of sitting with uncertainty, choosing not to treat Kenji's painful thoughts as an absolute command for his own intervention. Every time his mind tried to manufacture a solution, or leap into the novice's grievance, Tora would gently bring his attention back to the single crimson coal glowing invisibly beneath its white shroud of ash. He did not pretend that Kenji's hurt was not happening, and he did not turn his heart into a cold, unfeeling wall. He allowed his compassion to remain fully awake, but he kept it contained within his own boundaries, refusing to let the young man's emotional current dictate the movement of his own lungs. But the deeper lesson of the granite bed had not yet revealed itself to his awareness. As the hours moved toward the deep center of the night, the frantic velocity of Kenji's voice began to slow down. All by itself, he ran out of bitter words, his breathing changing from sharp gasps into long, trembling sighs. Because Tora had refused to fuel the fire with his own frantic energy, the chaos had nothing left to strike against. The young novice looked at Tora's unmoving, peaceful posture, and he saw a stability that did not collapse under the weight of his distress. He slowly moved closer to the center of the room, kneeling down on the timber floor beside the uncarved granite block. The stone had been quietly changing its internal temperature throughout the long night. The single deep coal had not burned itself out in a sudden flash of blinding light, because the layer of ash had preserved its core. Instead, its concentrated heat had slowly, methodically traveled into the deep molecules of the mountain granite. The massive block was now radiating a heavy mineral warmth that filled the immediate space with a soft, comforting temperature. It did not create a roaring flame, but it held a steady, reliable thermal shield that the cold alpine wind could not diminish. Kenji placed his frozen palms near the gray stone, feeling the boundary-contained heat seep into his shivering bones. The young novice did not find an immediate, perfect solution to his conflict with the kitchen stewards, and Tora did not offer a magical phrase to erase the reality of the injustice. But Kenji's panic had completely dissolved. He had found a safe harbor, not because Tora had ruined his own health to fix the problem, but because Tora had possessed the courage to remain a solid, unyielding hearth. He had allowed Kenji to visit the fire without allowing him to exhaust the woodpile. The two seekers sat together in the dim cabin, sharing the quiet warmth of a single ember that had been preserved through the power of a clear boundary. Master Joseph smiled from the dark threshold, his voice a soft rustle like dry cedar leaves in the winter wind. He remarked that the mountain does not move when the storm arrives, yet it provides a shelter for every wild bird that knows how to sit still among the rocks. He told Tora that authentic care does not require self-annihilation, because a heart that knows how to keep its own borders is the only sanctuary that can offer true warmth to a freezing valley. Tora bowed his head in deep gratitude, a profound realization settling into his spirit as the final embers of his old identity turned to harmless ash. Slowly, the teaching becomes personal as we watch the two monks rest beside the gray granite block. The stone is the exact shape of the internal boundary you are invited to cultivate within your own mind tonight. You do not have to burn your own flesh to prove that your love is real, and you do not have to turn your spirit into a chaotic rescue vessel for every person who enters your life with a storm. Before we discover how this alpine wisdom applies to the modern structures of your daily schedule, let your own body imitate the unyielding density of the granite. You can sit flat in your own shelter, preserve your central warmth within your own chest, and trust that the people you care for are entirely capable of tending their own woodpiles while you give yourself total permission to rest. The profound stillness that settled over the uncarved granite block is not a state of cold avoidance. It is the beginning of true emotional sanctuary. When we watch Tora anchor his awareness to that single ember glowing beneath the ash, we are witnessing a quiet revolution inside the human nervous system. He did not cure the kitchen elders of their harsh judgments, and he did not erase the raw sting of Kenji's immediate rejection. His transformation occurred because he stopped treating his companion's emotional winter as an active emergency that he was obligated to fix with his own flesh. This is the exact threshold where the exhausting habit of universal problem-solving begins to lose its grip on your mind. Let us look closely at the hidden mechanisms that drive us to run out into the snow at midnight. When someone you care about experiences a sudden drop in their emotional temperature, your intellect does not simply observe their pain. It immediately internalizes their distress, turning their silence or their anger into a definitive accusation against your worth. You lie awake replaying their words, wondering if you could have spoken more gently, or if your failures caused their current isolation. You begin to experience an intense form of self-judgment, believing that if you were truly wise, you would have already found a way to melt their frost. You are trying to use personal shame as a hidden engine to force an immediate emotional transformation in another person. This constant need for external approval is a subtle form of control disguised as pure compassion. We find it terrifying to witness someone we love sitting in the cold space of their own human struggles, because their distress makes us feel fundamentally unsafe. We run through the valley trying to rearrange their reality to ease our own internal anxiety. We become hypervigilant, monitoring their facial expressions, checking their tone of voice, and scanning the horizon for any hidden sign of conflict. We treat their suffering as our permanent identity, convincing ourselves that we have no right to experience a peaceful hearth until the entire mountain is perfectly warm. This is how we inadvertently turn our beautiful sensitivity into an engine of absolute exhaustion. One of the most liberating insights of the Buddhist tradition is the clear distinction between the raw friction that life brings to our door and the massive weight of extra suffering our mind constructs through resistance. The first pain is the neutral weather of a changing universe. It is the reality of a conflict, the natural presence of grief, or the dark seasons that the people around us must navigate to grow. These events are heavy, they are real, and they are completely outside our ability to govern. You cannot command another person's karma to resolve itself ahead of its natural timing. This primary cold is simply the baseline reality of living in a world made of multiple human hearts. The true torment begins when our mind refuses to allow the winter to exist. We add a heavy layer of control and self-blame to the original friction, believing that if we suffer enough, we can change the weather. To understand this with complete clarity, imagine a builder who has been commissioned to construct a small shelter in an alpine valley. The arrival of a freezing mountain blizzard is the first pain. It is an unchosen environmental reality that makes the timber cold, dampens the ground, and forces the builder to accept that he cannot lay stone while the frost is heavy. This primary chill requires him to sit quietly inside his workshop, waiting for the weather to change. The secondary suffering is what the builder creates when he attempts to build a massive canvas roof over the entire mountain range to stop the snow from falling. He becomes absolutely furious that the alpine sky is wide and uncontrollable. He runs out into the gale with a tiny needle and thread, trying to sew a giant blanket out of his own garments to protect every cedar tree in the forest. He ruins his fingers, he freezes his limbs, and he destroys his own small sanctuary. Not because the blizzard is malicious, but because he treats the natural scale of the mountain as a personal failure of his architecture. He is destroying his own capacity to shelter, because he cannot endure the existence of an unroofed world. Now let this wisdom come closer to your own life tonight. The quietness of your dark room is simply the uncarved granite block after the storm has run out of rain. The tight, heavy restriction in your lower stomach is the massive canvas blanket you have been trying to sew for the entire valley. You are demanding that your mind find a way to shield every person in your life from their own unchosen winter before you give yourself permission to sleep. You believe that if you stop carrying their cold rooms tonight, you are committing a terrible act of betrayal. But your spirit is not broken by the natural difficulties of your relationships. It is simply worn out by the relentless labor of trying to roof the sky. Peace does not arrive because you successfully eliminate every draft from your environment. True inner freedom begins when you change your relationship with the cold spaces you cannot control. When an anxious thought enters your awareness tonight, declaring that you are responsible for someone else's emotional climate, you do not have to lift the heavy iron basket to answer it. You do not have to treat that worry as an absolute truth just because it speaks with a familiar, demanding voice inside your chest. You can choose to notice the panic without letting it direct your hands. You can witness the fear of being found inadequate with immense, unconditional tenderness. Name its fragile structure and let it pass through your awareness like a quiet wind moving through the pines. By refusing to turn another person's suffering into your own identity, you are practicing true spiritual discipline. You are allowing your awareness to be like that solid block of granite, holding a single, deep coal of warmth without allowing the external blizzard to scatter your energy. You are reminding your tired brain that your value as a human being is not an item that must be bought through absolute self-obliteration. The people whose comfort you have been guarding do not require your exhaustion to survive their own winter. They need you to remain a stable, unmoving hearth where they can find an authentic refuge when they are ready to sit still. Slowly, the teaching becomes personal. The hot, leaking embers that ruined Torah's hands are exactly like the modern anxieties you feel when you attempt to please everyone at your own expense. Every time you cross your own boundaries to prevent a minor conflict, you are dropping your precious warmth into the snow, leaving your own inner temple cold and empty. You cannot fix a relationship by destroying the very person who inhabits it. When you have the courage to keep your fire within its own borders, you allow the sediment to settle, and you discover that your stability is the greatest gift you can offer to a changing world. As you lie here in the soft shadow of the night, think of how much energy you save when you stop treating another person's mood as an active emergency for your soul. You are letting your ribs expand. You are letting your tight wrists loosen their hold, and you are allowing your palms to remain soft against the sheets. The world knows how to navigate its own seasons without your continuous midnight calculations. You do not have to build a giant roof over the mountain before the dawn arrives. You can let the single ember of your own life rest quietly beneath its protective layer of white ash, and trust that the vast, silent dark is exactly where your heart belongs to remember its unshakable peace. The psychological integration is complete. Please say continue for delivery part 7 of 8. Where we will apply this high forest wisdom directly to the structures of modern schedules, texts, and family demands. The solid density of the granite hearthbed begins to cast its long, warming shadow directly into the complicated pathways of your modern daily life. We must allow this silent mountain wisdom to travel away from the high alpine timber and the heavy gray stones of the grove, bringing its steady insulation straight into the immediate architecture of your current schedule. You do not spend your afternoons chopping cedar logs or clearing deep snowdrifts from a physical courtyard. Your waking hours are measured by illuminated glass screens, instantaneous digital networks, and the constant social pressure to maintain a perfectly happy environment for everyone around you. Yet, the invisible exhaustion that keeps you staring at the ceiling tonight is the exact same force that drove the apprentice out into the gale with bleeding palms. The modern world does not teach you to harbor your own core. It demands that you serve as an endless distribution network for everyone else's comfort, transforming your private sensitivity into a source of constant depletion. Think about how you experience a tiny, unsettling drop in the emotional temperature of an ordinary afternoon. You receive a brief, uncharacteristically short text message from someone you love, or perhaps you notice a heavy, uncommunicative silence from a colleague across a shared workspace. Your intellect immediately begins to lift that heavy, leaking iron basket, sprinting backward through the corridors of your memory. You feel a tight, suffocating panic forming in the center of your throat. Your thoughts begin to move with an aggressive internal velocity, auditing your recent choices, checking your phrasing, and wondering if your inadequacies have caused their winter. In that quiet moment of waiting, you are attempting to rob your own central stove to fix a draft you did not cause. You turn their temporary mood into an active crisis for your own soul. We can see this same exhausting momentum when you look at your life and believe your timeline is falling behind the rest of the world. You open your digital interfaces during a quiet evening, watching the bright, radiant fires of people you have never met. You see their promotions, their perfect domestic spaces, and their effortless social harmony displayed under an artificial light. Your mind instantly turns their visible speed into a rod to punish your own unpolished edges. You look at the quiet, uncarved stages of your own transition and feel an overwhelming wave of internal shame. You tell yourself that you are not enough, that your time is running out, and that you must force your life to burn with a spectacular, public brightness to be worthy of love. You are treating the quiet, restorative darkness of your present hour as if it were a permanent sentence of failure. Consider the deep, corrosive fatigue of wanting to rest but feeling an intense sense of guilt the moment your hands go completely idle. You lie down in your room, but your brain immediately begins to inventory the emotional state of your entire social circle. It whispers that you have no right to experience a single hour of stillness while your family is anxious, your friends are struggling, or your workspace remains unresolved. This chronic guilt is simply the old voice of your panic, trying to drag you back out to the dikes of obligation. You have been conditioned to believe that your value as a human being is determined entirely by how much discomfort you can absorb for others. You treat your sleep as a luxury that must be earned through total physical collapse, rather than a neutral sanctuary that belongs to your heart by right of birth. Perhaps you know the secret pain of smiling and pretending to be perfectly stable while your chest carries a heavy volume of uncertainty. You move through your domestic routines, answering every question with a cheerful tone, while inside your spirit there is a wild storm rising against the timber. You believe that you must play the part of an unbreakable barrier for the people around you. You treat your own genuine anxiety as a defect that must be hidden away from the light of the valley. But this continuous performance is what truly drains your vitality. You are locking your nervous system in a state of chronic alarm, refusing to allow the unworked clay of your true feelings to be touched by the cool air of the night. But the profound wisdom of non-striving is not practiced by escaping into a distant monastery. True freedom is found in the very small, ordinary thresholds of your upcoming morning. It begins when you feel that familiar surge of urgency rising in your stomach as you wait for a text message or a career breakthrough. Instead of letting your fingers scroll through the darkness in search of a temporary reassurance, you can choose to perform one small act of spiritual discipline. You can choose to pause. You can take one quiet, unhurried breath before you allow your thoughts to dictate the movement of your hands. You can let the delay remain empty without turning it into an active crisis for your identity. This simple pause is a beautiful realignment of your entire internal world. In that tiny pocket of time, you are letting the fragile stems of your destiny drop back down into the protective darkness of the silt. You are allowing the murky water of your immediate panic to clear all by itself, without throwing your hands into the current to fix it. When an anxious thought enters your awareness, declaring that your life is withered because you cannot see the progress today, you do not have to obey its command. You can look at the worry with immense, unconditional compassion. You can name its fragile, restless nature and watch it pass across your mind like a gray cloud mirroring itself on a flat pond. We can bring this soft, porous posture into the exact way we hold our relationships. When we fear that a connection is changing or slipping away, our old habits drive us to grip the other person with a suffocating tightness. We try to manage their moods. We monitor their text tones. And we demand continuous evidence of their loyalty to ease our own internal dread. This white-knuckle clenching is the exact force that tears the delicate micro-roots of human intimacy. When you align your heart with the lesson of the wetlands, you learn how to care deeply without turning your love into a heavy trap. You can allow the people you cherish to navigate their own private winters without treating their silence as an attack on your worth. You do not have to solve the massive riddle of your life before you are permitted to close your eyes tonight. The modern marketplace has finally closed its gates. The notifications have stopped arriving, and the projects you are building are completely unreachable in the dark. You have spent many months driving your body through a very turbulent and uncertain landscape, and your spirit is fully entitled to a total cessation of performance at midnight. You do not have to be a flawless provider, an omnipotent protector, or a tireless manager of outcomes right now. You can officially resign from your position as the frantic driver of the storm, allowing the heavy night to cushion your exhaustion without a single condition. Think of how much lighter your upcoming days will feel when you stop treating the natural slowness of life as your enemy. A plan will be delayed, an answer will be withheld, or an expected transition will take twice as long as you mapped out, and you will meet the empty space with a steady, unhurried heart. You will move through your domestic and professional spheres with a completely altered quality of presence. Your shoulders will be loose, your throat will be open, and your mind will be anchored in the crisp reality of the immediate step. You will no longer be a panicked traveler drowning in the fog of your tomorrow, but a wide, deep channel that knows exactly how to let the river find its own level. As you lie here in the soft shadow of the room, let the vast starlight of the valley settle into the center of your forehead. The complex scenarios you have been rehearsing are nothing but silver illusions that will lose their texture before the sun rises. You cannot buy a permanent guarantee of safety through 3 more hours of intense mental auditing. Let the heavy momentum of your ambitions fall away completely into the dark ground. Allow the quiet evening moisture to absorb your unvoiced anxieties, and let your body remember that it belongs to the stable foundation beneath you, completely independent of your visible achievements. You are safe enough to let the roots drink in the dark. The high alpine night has reached its deepest stillness, wrapping the vast cedar grove in an absolute, windless sanctuary of soft shadow. Outside the heavy timber walls of our cabin, the winter blizzard has completely run out of momentum, leaving the dark mountain ridges covered in a pristine layer of undisturbed white powder. The long, frantic trails of black soot, where the embers used to fall, have been entirely blanketed by the fresh snowfall, dissolving into the quiet landscape as if they had never existed at all. The uncarved block of mountain granite sits silently in the center of the room, holding its heavy mineral warmth with perfect stability. The single crimson coal remains safely nestled in its shallow hearthbed, glowing with a quiet, concentrated energy beneath its thick protective shroud of soft white ash. There are no more freezing rooms to rush toward, and there are no more leaking baskets to lift from the floor. The world outside has gone completely quiet, and your spirit is finally permitted to return to its own sacred enclosure. Let the slow, heavy rhythm of this winter sanctuary settle directly into the deepest marrow of your bones. Your physical frame does not need to maintain a single posture of defense tonight, and it requires absolutely no effort from your muscles to stay supported by the bed. You can feel the absolute weight of your limbs sinking down into the mattress. Letting go of the long day with every passing minute, your shoulders have dropped their invisible burden, widening across the sheets as they surrender the need to guard the happiness of the valley. The tight restriction that lived across your ribcage has dissolved entirely into the cool, still air of the cabin. Let your breathing become beautifully soft and small, a quiet, effortless wave that rises and falls within its own natural borders, matching the slow, patient pulse of the frozen cedar forest outside your window. The fire you have been trying to distribute to everyone else has finally retracted back into your own body, finding its true resting place deep within your own chest. It does not need to flare with a blinding brilliance, and it does not need to prove its presence through a roaring blaze. It is simply there, a steady, self-contained pocket of warmth that burns safely behind your ribs, completely insulated from the external drafts of the world. The people whose comfort you have been frantically auditing throughout the day have been left behind in their own rooms, resting in the care of their own private destinies. Their unlit stoves and their cold hearths are completely outside your reach in the dark, and they do not require your exhaustion to endure their own winter. You have officially returned something you were never meant to carry, leaving the iron handles of your obligation to rest on the floor. The modern marketplace has closed its gates for the night, its lit screens and frantic digital networks fading into complete obscurity. The unreturned messages, the unresolved conflicts, and the heavy judgments you have been trying to calculate since the sun went down have frozen completely in the snow outside. You do not have to find a perfect answer for tomorrow before you are permitted to close your eyes. And your value as a human being is not an item that will perish if you choose to sleep. The night is a vast, unwritten temple that asks for nothing but your willingness to sit down in your own shelter. You are fully allowed to be unfinished, unpolished, and completely stationary at midnight, letting the unfinished projects of your life remain unroofed beneath the shadow of the mountain. Feel your jaw loosen its grip entirely, letting the small muscles behind your ears go soft and heavy in the darkness. The skin on your forehead is smooth, like a clearing in the trees where no feet have trodden since the storm ceased. Your hands are resting loosely against the fabric of your bed, your fingers uncurled and light, your palms completely empty of any duty to save the world. You are practicing the ultimate grace of boundaries simply by allowing your body to remain entirely still in the dark. Even the old memories of your overgiving are beginning to lose their heat, turning into harmless gray dust that settles softly over the hearthbed of your consciousness. You are no longer the universal keeper of the fire. but a silent witness to the quiet peace that lives within your own borders. Allow your mind to dissolve slowly into the dark, protective space of the cabin, falling away from the bitter timelines you have been chasing across the provinces. You are returning home to the quiet, uncarved core of your own awareness, a sanctuary that has never been diminished by the coldness of your environment. The universe knows how to guide the seasons without your continuous surveillance, and the mountain does not require your panic to stand firm against the weather. Let the natural gravity of sleep pull your thoughts downward, deeper into the warm, silent sediment of pure existence, where there are no problems left to solve and no identities left to manufacture. Your breath is a quiet wind moving through the frozen branches, carrying you softly into the vast, windless dark where everything is allowed to rest. And if the deep, unshakable warmth you have spent your entire life trying to carry to other houses was already resting safely within your own chest, waiting only for your hands to drop the basket,